Chapter 361, The Malignant One. Huff. Huff. Claudius was already beginning to feel the exhaustion in his body as he sprinted at full speed, without stop. His aged, wrinkled body began to ache, begging to slow down for even a moment. However, he knew he could not do that. Stopping for even the slightest of a second meant certain death. Sweat sprayed from his face as he navigated the path he and his men took to reach the Carrie Blanc mansion. His goal was simple: escape the capital. He had expended all of his mana, and right now he was merely running on the little reserves that his enchanted items gave him. He had lost all of his undead, and even if he had his full stock, they would be useless against the enemy. Even running was useless. But Claudius had to hold on to hope one way or the other. As a result, he found his legs moving faster. They swept past the silent city. Faster. They moved away from the peaceful ambience. Much faster. They trampled upon the unsoiled ground. Foss. Tur. Claudius tripped on something and found his body headed for the ground. Unfortunately for his tired self, he could do nothing but witness his collapse. Guh. He winced as he hit the ground, his eyes tightly shut. However, he couldn't allow himself to dawdle for much longer. He had to get up. He had to run. I have to, or else. Perhaps it was due to his overwhelming fear, but Claudius hadn't been paying any heed to his surroundings until now. It was dark, and he was running too fast, so he didn't take the time to observe. But now, as he knelt on the ground and looked around him, he found something odd. Where are the dead bodies? On their way to the Carrie Blanc mansion, the mercenary gang members had killed their fair share of people, while destroying properties and burning down homes. But Claudius could see no dead bodies. There were no burning houses or devastated properties. Everything was in perfect order, almost as if nothing had ever happened that night. Am I still in a dream? Claudius wondered to himself, his body trembling. He could no longer distinguish between dream and reality any longer. What if, after running for so long and finally reaching his point of escape, it all turned out to be a farce? What if he was actually still before the mansion? Would he really be able to tell? No one is pursuing me. Everywhere is eerily still. Yes, this had to be a dream. Or perhaps the opposite was true. Claudius remembered how Fabio bragged about killing so many people in the black market, and yet there was no sphere of blood with him. This wasn't merely the case of him being delusional either. Fernand also confirmed the same fact, which meant they all thought they killed people. But if there was bloodshed, there would be a sphere of blood. After putting his own experience into account, Claudius had to suspect that he and his men had completely dreamt through the entire massacre of the capital. There was never carnage or destruction. Just foolish men swinging their blades, thinking they were killing people. It looks like you figured it out. A certain silhouette appeared before Claudius. It was very dark, so he couldn't see it very well. However, he knew that voice very well. It came from the man who had single-handedly made all of them into fools. Which is it? Am I still in a dream right now, or did we hallucinate everything? The latter. Claudius couldn't see the man's face well, but he was sure he was smiling. Only the gleaming purple gaze of the one known as Ader was visible, and it stared down at Claudius in amusement. "See, can I ask you a question?" Claudius asked, his knees still remaining on the ground, as his body refused to move. No. That wasn't quite true. It was he who refused to move his body. There was no point, after all. Sure. Ask your question. Claudius leaked out a bitter smile as he parted his lips and finally addressed the issue he had been ignoring for so long. Why? Do you look so young and attractive? You're a necromancer, aren't you? That means you deal with miasma when handling corpses and turning them into undead. I'm only 33 years old, and yet I look like this. Claudius knew he was rambling to an enemy, but this was the first time he was telling anyone his real age and his personal struggle. He thought that if anyone could understand, it would be a fellow necromancer. My skin is wrinkled and loose, my body is aged, and my bones are weak. I always thought that it was a sacrifice I had to pay to attain the power I needed, but after seeing you, my resolve has wavered. Claudius looked up at the being who listened in silence, tears now falling from his eyes. Why? What did you have to sacrifice to give you such power? How can you have everything I wanted, with no flaws or caveat? What did you do that I didn't? What makes you so special? Claudius always believed he was special since he was a child. After all, it was incredibly rare for someone to be born with an exclusive skill, especially one as rare as his was. But, compared to the man standing before him, he was nothing. Why? Your mistake lies in your initial premise. Once Ader spoke, Claudius' thoughts were suspended. He only blankly looked at the man of darkness. Power requires sacrifice? Where did you get that absurd idea from? Those that claw their way into power will surely have a measure of it, based on what they scrape from the world. But true power is etched in a being's nature. 1636. And nature. This was the first time Claudius was hearing such a thing. Yes. Nature dictates that you are weak and I am strong. Ader's voice sank deep into the darkness. That is all there is to it. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Do you agree with Ader's philosophy? What are your thoughts? Chapter 362, The Malignant One. God is strong. Humans are weak. Angels are somewhere in between. As Claudius heard these words, he shuddered in ignorance. No matter how powerful a human tries to become, sacrificing all he can to attain strength, it will all fall under the allocated strength he is allowed to possess. Ader's words echoed coldly in the night. Ultimately, it will fall under weakness. So. All my attempts at strength were in vain. Maybe it had some worth against fellow humans, but your luck ran out when you faced me. You see, I know I'm not weak. Because I'm not human. And not human. Claudius' eyes widened as he heard this deep revelation. I can take on whatever shape I want, while also possessing the abilities of those whose form I take. In essence, a flash of light sparked around Ader, and his form came into light as he crouched so he could somewhat be on the same level as Claudius. The latter's eyes bulged as he looked at his reflection, the miserable old man he had become. I can become you. Ader had transformed into Claudius in every sense of the word, and upon seeing this, the old man felt his heart ache. He truly had sacrificed everything for nothing. I can also use all your abilities. There are a few limitations placed on my power, but that's how it works in simple terms. Ader rose to his feet, transforming back into the handsome man he once was. You're invincible, Claudius croaked. With such a power, Ader was at least in the realm of the absolute. There was no doubt about it in Claudius' mind. Am I really? Perhaps in some worlds, that would ring true. Even in this world, maybe. Ader smirked, shaking his head as he circled around the despairing one. However, there exist beings who far transcend my current state. The dragons. Yeah. I'll admit that there exists some that I can't beat right now. But all of it is only a matter of time. Then. However, there is one that I couldn't possibly hope to beat no matter the passage of time. Claudius could only make a guess at this point, but he muttered a response. Your master. Precisely. He couldn't see Ader's face, but the way his eyes narrowed and from the sound of his tone, Claudius knew he was smiling. He had more questions, and so he didn't hesitate to ask them. There was nothing left to lose, after all. How strong is your master? Let's just say he can do exactly what I can do and so much more. Ader's amused chuckle echoed in the dark. However, this response only made Claudius all the more curious. Can you not simply transform into him and use his powers? Or is that one of your limitations? For a moment, there was silence among the two who conversed. Then, I can indeed take on his form. My limitation prevents me from turning into anyone with a higher class than me, so master isn't off limits. However, despite saying this, there was no tone of triumph in Ader's voice. It was the opposite, actually. I can normally use all the skills in my target's arsenal, though if it is higher than my class, then the effects will be proportionally reduced. Ader continued in his melancholy. However, there is one exception, the primeval tier. Claudius was lost, once again. To humans, the highest realm that existed was the absolute one meant for heroes and gods. If there was to be any realm above that, then perhaps it would belong to wherever designed reality and existence itself. A sort of divine realm. But what was this primeval tier that Ader spoke of? The bulk of master's power exists within that primeval skill, and I can't access it? Isn't it amazing? Ader's melancholy quickly turned into amazement. He cackled in delight and drowned in the pleasure of it. Master's power is something I can never touch, a realm I won't ever reach. According to the earlier definition Ader had given down, it only meant one thing. Compared to master, I am weak. As Claudius looked at Ader, he could now understand at least to an extent why he had played with everyone so casually. We were really worth nothing, weren't we? Compared to the likes of this man and his master, the humans of this world were really nothing but dust. It was my mistake, Claudius finally admitted as his face fell. I made too many assumptions from the start. Power. True power wasn't something one had to sacrifice everything to possess. It was a mandate. Are you even a necromancer? Claudius asked in passing. No, I am a being of chaos, so I can use the chaos art of ancient Magike. The hollow technique is simply one of those arts. I see. It seems I was allowed a skill to summon the undead in my stockpile, but that's about it. I doubt I'll be permitted to use any advanced ancient Magike here. Not that I have enough energy to do so. I see. Out of everyone present, you were the most entertaining. At the very least, you managed to feed my pleasures for a while. You have my gratitude. Claudius didn't know how to react towards being praised as a plaything. He could only respond as he normally would. You're welcome. For a moment, there was a lull in the area. So, what will happen to me now? He asked with a bitter smile. Claudius already knew he wouldn't be spared. Ader didn't seem like the kind of man who would show the likes of him any mercy. Well, I already made sure you would die and come back to me as an undead. The effects should be taking place pretty soon. Claudius' eyes widened as soon as he heard this. When? Earlier, when you were still in the dome of darkness. Aahh. Claudius' body shivered as he recognized the truth. He stared at his hand and found it already pale. His body was refusing to function, and he was collapsing on the ground. The Ader that was in front of him was nowhere to be seen. I see. I was dreaming again. There was never an Ader in front of him, and there was no conversation with a being of such magnitude. All those complicated things had to be what his brain conjured up in the end. I was truly strong, wasn't I? With that as his final thought, Claudius slumped to the ground and met his end. For a second, he remained like that an old corpse, lying on the freezing floor of an empty street. Then, his body jerked back to life. He rose to his 2 feet and turned towards where he was called. He had vacant eyes and an absolutely dull face, completely devoid of any will to live and stripped completely of all his desires. All Claudius had become was a slave. Ader smiled as he saw Claudius approach the lump of flesh that was his comrade's. Is there anything funny? Asher, who was still trembling beside him, asked. In response to this, Ader simply shrugged. No. Not really. As Ader stared at Claudius becoming one with the abominable fleshy undead that everyone had merged into, he grinned in further amusement. Soon, all 5 of the heads of destruction along with the wyvern became one. I just had a rather fun conversation with someone through his mind. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. This concludes Claudius' story. I apologize if it was too long for some of you. I really enjoyed it, though, and I hope I'm not alone in that. Once again, I appreciate you all sticking around. Chapter 363, Fools in the Dark. So, the mission failed, huh? A group of about 50 men sat together in an isolated room. There were no windows, and no external source of light save for a few candles. The men were coated in the black, though the turbans they used to wrap their faces were now pulled down so their faces were shown. This was Scylla's recon unit, though it was members short. Is that what you're mostly concerned about? Who the hell was that man? How could he kill Leader Jal just like that? Jal was often compared to the 9 heads of destruction in strength, so when they first saw his corpse, none of the recon unit members present believed their eyes. However, after seeing how the other heads of destruction struggled against a single undead made by the mysterious black-suited man, they instantly realized how big of a threat the enemy was. Once the other squad reunited with them, they planned their escape. And, when no eye was on them, they stealthily left the premises. Do you think they're all dead? One of the unit members asked. I think so. Are really? Even with 5 heads of destruction leading the charge? For a moment, there was silence. No one really knew how the fight had concluded, considering they left prematurely. Still, none of them regretted their decision. At least we were able to secure the merchandise for Lady Scylla. It's in the other room, right? Yes. Whew. I wouldn't want her to chew us out for failing to do that along with failing the rest of the mission. Haha. Indeed. As they laughed among themselves, a creaking sound began to echo from the door. Huh. Is that? All the eyes in the room darted towards the only entrance and exit within the dark room. Some even reached for their weapons and waited. The creaking continued, and the door slowly opened. Gulps could be heard, and a few now had their hands on the hilt of their blade, ready to strike. Then, how troublesome! A man entered the room. The moment they saw him, their faces melted into relief, with nearly everyone exhaling and relaxing their muscles. After all, the man who just entered was the deputy leader of the recon unit. "What's with all of you?" he asked with puzzlement as he stepped into the room, locked the door, and went to have his seat at the corner of the room. Many leaked out silly smiles, though a few still watched the deputy leader with anxiety. "So, how did the call with Lady Scylla go? Was she understanding?" This was the most important question to all of the members of the recon unit at the moment. Despite being in the secret Scylla safe house within the capital, they couldn't feel safe until their boss and master had deemed them so. The deputy leader had stepped out so he could use the communication device with him to communicate with Scylla. Since the walls of this particular room was made from dense orichalcum, hence preventing any signal involving mana to pass. Now that he had returned, they awaited the news. She wasn't answering. It's strange, considering she always makes time to respond to our calls. The deputy leader appeared worried, and for good reason. Without some sort of external intervention from Scylla, or at least some kind of order, they were stranded in the capital. With such a monster within the capital, it was easy to see why they weren't at ease despite being somewhere safe. "Do you think something happened on their end? Perhaps some kind of interference? Maybe things aren't going according to plan in the Dark Gathering too? What should we do now?" Murmurs turned into echoes of confusion as all the parties stared at each other indecisively. None knew what to do. Even the deputy leader had a guilt-ridden and absolutely confused expression on his face. If only Jal was here. His thoughts trailed in silence. He would have been able to lead everything and everyone better. He just had to die to that T. Looks like Master is pretty much done with things on his end. The voice of a stranger echoed amidst the group of people who didn't instantly pick up the sound. Its amused tone had a strange sense of familiarity, but there was no doubt about how detached it was. By the time the recon unit members realized what was going on, it was too late. The dark-suited man, Ader, was standing in their midst. How? This is a top-secret safe house. How did he get in? Impossible. Eek. The blood-red hair of the ebony man flowed as he looked at them with a condescending gaze of amusement. It felt like they were nothing but maggots in his eyes. Safe house, huh? Is that what you see? Interesting. Suddenly, the safe and cozy comfort of the room began to crumble. It was replaced by an open field under the night sky. They could see the clouds, the dull glow of the moon, and the scarce stars in the sky. A completely different sight from what they remembered a few moments earlier. This is just on the outskirts of the capital. You never retreated to your safe house, Ader said as he took his seat in the air. Everyone who saw him exclaimed in overwhelming shock. They couldn't even pick what to be surprised about, since everything was happening too quickly. What did you to do us? One of them screamed, only to cover his lips in fear. In response, Ader only smiled warmly. He answered calmly. From the moment you stepped into the capital, you were all under my power. As such, everything they experienced from that moment on was subject to him. Was it real? Was it not? They could not tell in the slightest. Now, it's my turn to ask a question. Ader narrowed his gaze as he looked at the paralyzed group. Why do you think I let you escape? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I understand that some readers might not like how Ader is taking a lot of screen time, but do be patient. The night will soon be over. Chapter 364, Shadow Slave. Silence. Deafening silence took over the members of the recon unit. They could not move their bodies for some reason, else they would have fled. Besides, even if they ran, they would still be stuck under Ader's illusion. The mere fact that Ader was here meant that the mercenary gang lost. Hence, if he wanted to, he could also unleash the undead he previously unsummoned and wreck them. Bottom line. There was no escape. You don't need to answer the question. It was rhetorical. Ader chuckled as he looked at the group with hidden delight. They all gulped simultaneously. I want information. No, more than that. Ader rubbed his chin as he spoke. I plan on controlling your group so you can scour the entire alliance and sniff out as much as you can far and wide. Since you're considered elite, you must be pretty good, right? The recon unit members shuddered as they heard what the man before them was saying. It was indeed true that they were the best at what they did, investigating, digging up dirt, and navigating everything regarding both the illegal and mainstream paths within the entire United Human Alliance. When it came to espionage, sabotage, and thorough investigations, they were the best. I would have used the minions in my arsenal, since they're more efficient and competent, but they lack that human element as well as the experience you've all accumulated. The recon unit felt a bit of relief from what they were hearing. We have worth. Their thoughts echoed. As long as they were useful for something, the man before them wouldn't kill them. To be honest, that was enough for them. All the members of Scylla's recon unit were her slaves. They had no freedom or life of their own. If Ader made them his slave, nothing really changed. They just changed employers. And so, after deliberating both the advantages and disadvantages of using you versus using my undead, I came up with a perfect compromise. Ader's grin widened to monstrous proportions. I'll simply make you undead. That way, you'll be more efficient and competent. The eyes of all the recon unit members bulged in shock. Of course, I'll make sure you keep your memories and everything else. You'll only be slightly stronger than your current selves, but at least you won't break easily and you can endlessly serve. Before they could think any further, perhaps even beg and offer their undying loyalty, Ader had already begun the process. Hollow technique number 2, Shadow Slave. In that instant, a dark silhouette washed into all 50 or so of the men, causing them to collapse on the ground dead. Their gray corpses oozed darkness, and their cold, lifeless forms remained stagnant for a few seconds. Then, you. They returned to false life, the white in their eyes darkened, with dark vein-like markings appearing in multiple parts of their skin. All of them had become undead. You've become shadow slaves. You can move freely through shadows and do a lot of interesting things, which should further assist you with your mission. One of the requirements to become a shadow slave was that the targets had to be killed by the hollow technique. In exchange for just a few seconds of painless death, they were basically immortal creatures who never tired or required sustenance. They could turn incorporeal and become shadows. They could travel long distances and even blend in with their surroundings. All their senses and physical abilities were heightened, and they could always relay information to their master. They also possessed all the skills and abilities they had before death. The only problem was that their class would be changed and forever stuck under the C-tier shadow slave class. Since they were merely minions meant for reconnaissance and information gathering, however, this much was fine. Very convenient tools to have. Ader smiled as he gave one final look at them. He ceased sitting and stood on his 2 feet. I've passed across the details of your task to your minds. Begin immediately. All the shadow slaves knelt before Ader, bowing their heads in profound reverence. A second later, they were nowhere to be seen. Their bodies had become one with the darkness, and they had blended into the night. Master desires to completely eradicate the criminal underworld, however if care is not taken, they will spring up again. Such was human nature. If given enough time, malicious individuals would gather together under the banner of self-interest. They would form their own dark triumvirate. But, as long as I keep undying watchers on them and nip the problem in the bud before anything further arises, then there will be no issue at all. Ader smiled as he looked at the darkened sky. Master will be able to learn all the skills of the ones I captured later, which will further improve his might. A tinge of regret formed on Ader's face, though. How I wish Master could use the arts. But that time is yet to come. He is too young. Ader's grin broadened regardless. Soon, Master. You will ascend beyond the bounds which nature has dictated for you. He licked his lips in anticipation. Ader simply could not wait to watch it happen, all in the fullness of time. Only you can do it, Master. Only Ray Skylar, holder of the primeval power, could possibly reach such height. Status window. Ader whispered. Name Ader. Race Bake Nico. Class Absolute Summon. Level 3. Life Force, 1000. Mana Level, 1500. Combat Ability, 2500. Stat Points, 200. Skills. $1 yen / euro pound / K. Alignment Chaotic Evil. An absolute beast whose true form remains unknown, but takes the form of a cat. It is a great trickster with malevolent desires. It is a wicked entity. Calling me a wicked entity, huh? Ader muttered as darkness shrouded his entire self. Soon, he vanished from sight, leaving only the whispers of his voice behind. How cold? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I have a question for you all. Who do you think is more powerful? Ader or Adrian? Also, who is smarter between the two? Chapter 365, Conclusion of the Night. So. That's what happened, huh? Rebel was still recoiling from the words of his son. What he described wasn't as gory or bloody as what Relix had displayed during the Dark Gathering, but something about it felt more twisted. Far darker. The worst part is, I could have sworn that there was a lot of damage during the entire fight, but there's nothing. Nothing at all. Asher replied, still not completely himself. The honest truth was that he was scared. Was he in a dream? Was he in reality? What if, just like the mercenary gang, he thought he saw something which wasn't real? Asher didn't know what to believe anymore. You just need rest. Rebel smiled at his son, though he too had some rabid fear within himself. Perhaps they both needed the rest. Sir Relix. He slaughtered all the enemies without mercy. I've never seen a man kill with such lack of remorse. And so many at once too. Both Relix and his subordinate, Ader, seemed to be cut from the same cloth, one that even Rebel could not fully comprehend. The battle is won, and now it is time for the aftermath. Rebel chuckled, a hint of fear in his eyes. What do you mean, father? I mean, Sir Relix was employed by us to take care of this mess. Now that it is over, isn't it time to think about his payment? It felt like an absurd thing to say, but they had to face it, the truth that confronted them. What could they pay such a man? It seems you also need some rest, father, Asher said with a tired smile. Rebel nodded, returning the exact same expression. Even though it was nowhere near enough, both father and son decided to consider the horrors they witnessed as a penance for their crimes. They knew what awaited them if they deviated from their current path. Certain tragedy, followed by inevitable death. That night, everything changed. The world was turned upside down in the span of merely a few hours. While the denizens of the capital were fast asleep, oblivious to the events that had transpired within the walls of the massive city, the situation in the allied merchant city was completely different. Scylla's building, the location for the Dark Gathering, was exposed to the world that very night. Troops of the Alliance stormed into the building, searching every nook and cranny until they were able to see the horrors for themselves. Of course, they still required extensive investigations to piece together most of the details, but the core issues did not elude them. At the very least, they did not elude General Lucy and Counselor Conrad. They saw for themselves the kind of darkness that had been festering within the haven that the Alliance was supposed to create. Slave trade was expected to be the vilest thing they would find, but that was hardly the most disgusting thing was seen in their pursuit for the truth. They saw it all. The bad, the worse, and the ugly. All the disgusting truths came to light that night. And then what? The black market was officially disbanded, and the triumvirate collapsed. The criminal underworld was done for, and while there were bound to be vestiges here and there, those were on borrowed time. Sooner or later, they too would die. The world saw, that day, that darkness would ultimately fall. And justice would prevail. Merchants were reminded to remain honest and diligent in their dealings with customers. And clients knew they had to be fair. If they weren't, the angel of death could descend upon the land once more and reap justice. Yes. They all felt it. They heard whispers from the passing soldiers who described the gory sight that the public was not allowed to see. Most importantly, they heard the name. The name that would go on to be a legend amongst the denizens of the merchant city and beyond. The Reaper. It's been a long night. Ray smiled to himself as he sat on his bed. He was in an entirely different outfit, in his real form. His pajamas felt a bit oversized for him, but he didn't mind at all. In fact, he liked the space. I killed even more people. I already knew I would do it, but still. Ray had steeled his heart. It was one of the reasons he decided not to tell Alicia anything. He already knew what he was going to do. However, despite all his planning, there were a lot of things he hadn't accounted for. One of those was the presence of Adrian Chase, how deep the conspiracy went, and how he had been a puppet on a very loose string all this time. But more than that, I didn't expect this world to be so twisted. He had always been grateful for the second chance he got to enjoy in H-Tray. He had overpowered abilities, allies who respected him, a loyal subordinate, a lot of money, and plenty of prospects. Sure, it was a dangerous world, but he was very strong. I never thought I would live an easy life here. I already knew I would have to grind and keep getting stronger if I didn't want to get left behind. Never once did Ray consider getting comfortable. But this world is not what I thought it was. Perhaps he had his naivete to blame. He didn't expect the human malice and wickedness of this world to reach such a peak. If I had known from the start. Ray narrowed his eyes and let tears flow. All the tears he saved up, they streamed down his face and dropped to the ground. If I had known it was like this, I wouldn't have hesitated from the start. All the wicked humans in this world, people like Scylla, and the others on the list, deserved the same fate. Miserable death. They weren't worthy of his mercy in the slightest. The same way he viewed dragons as scum who toyed with humans, or how he saw monsters as threats to the safety of people. That's how I should see those scum. That was the conclusion Ray reached that night. And from that point on, there was no going back. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. As you can see, we're drawing closer to the end of this arc. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I liked writing it. I did tell you it would be the darkest one yet. Chapter 366, Praise from the Master. Ray found it difficult to sleep that night. And when he finally fell asleep, he had the worst of nightmares. Needless to say, he didn't enjoy his night at all. Memories upon memories appeared to haunt him, tormenting his mind until he finally woke up. By the time he did so, it was already morning. Yo! He rose up, stretching both arms as he welcomed the freshness of a new day. Somehow, he felt at ease just knowing that it was morning. Something about the new day seemed to wash away the anxiety of the night. AHH. Ray smacked his lips as he blinked several times. He wanted to make sure he was really seeing what was in front of him. And sure enough, he was. Good morning, Master. I hope you had a pleasant night. Ader was bowing his head first thing in the morning, with one hand on his chest and the other behind him. Of course, he was still dressed in his entire black attire, but something about him seemed slick this particular morning. Perhaps it was the bright gleam in his eyes or the cheerful smile on his face. Either way, Ader seemed pleased just seeing Ray wake up. How long have you been watching me? Ray muttered as he groggily cleaned the little tears that spilled out thanks to his yawns. Not for too long, Master. Just a few hours. Ray smiled and shook his head a little. In all honesty, it felt nice having someone dote over him like this. When did he start acting like my parent? He mused and shook his head. You should stop the stalker behavior, Ader. The moment he said this, Ader's face fell slightly, which caused Ray to quickly rethink his words. Did I hurt his feelings? Does he even have feelings? He sighed and shook his head once again. Ader was a chaotic entity. He was the worst kind of evil, even the system confirmed that much. Having him around was incredibly advantageous, but Ray had to wonder if he could treat Ader like how he would treat a normal person. Well, he is my familiar, after all. I don't think I should treat him poorly. Not after a job well done the previous night. You did well last night, Ader. Just as you promised, no denizen of the capital died. Your praises are too much, Master. I only did what was expected of me. Ader bowed his head even more deeply. What was expected of you, huh? Can't you just take the compliment? Ray cracked a slightly wide smile and decided not to bother himself with the details. Do you desire any reward? He asked. Ader seemed to bow even deeper for some reason, after hearing the question. I am not deserving of such. Really? Well, I guess that's fine. Although, if you insist, there is indeed something I would like very much. Ray narrowed his gaze in suspicion the moment he heard those words from Ader. Was he buttering him up? I swear, if you ask for anything like a bunch of children to eat, we're gonna have some problems. Go on. Tell me. Ray smiled, hiding his true thoughts underneath. Any evil requests would be reciprocated with a slap on the back for sure. Well. Ray waited for the request with a racing heart. I would like you to praise me, Master. It took a moment for that request to fully register in the mind of the confused Ray. He couldn't comprehend it at first, and his eyes became a wide blank sheet. Yet. Who's a good boy? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Ray was currently rubbing the belly of the black cat that sat on his lap, and an unconscious smile was tugging at his lips. AHH. This is so cringe. His mind yelled as he gently stroked the feline. It had very soft fur, and the skin underneath was equally pleasant to the touch. In all honesty, despite feeling uncomfortable at first, Ray was beginning to enjoy the process. His cheeks were beet red as he massaged the cat. He could see Ader purring and twisting his body in delight, an obvious sign that the chaotic evil being the personification of chaos, as he called himself, was enjoying the belly rub. Ray didn't know which was worse, the fact that he was literally petting a grown-ass man, or the fact that he didn't want to stop. It's so addicting. Now I know why Alicia is so passionate about cats. In a way, doing this for only a few minutes allowed Ray's body and mind to completely relax. He soon forgot about his nightmares, and his slightly uneasy mind became purged of all negativity. In a way, this seemed more like a reward for him as well. Thank you, Ader. You're really. Ray smiled at the black cat on his lap. More considerate than you appear. Ray's smile widened as he took his eyes off Ader and stared straight ahead, only to notice a screen floating in front of him. It was his status window. Name Ray Skyler. Race human. Class anomaly. Level 115. Life force, 146. Monolevel, 240. Combat ability, 207. Stat points, 0. Skills. Skills. Alignment neutral good. You are an irregularity to the world. Achieving the unbelievable, shaking the balance of reality. You seek to overturn what is and isn't. Will you succeed? Or will your failure be miserable? It looks like I was able to grow stronger. Ray smiled wryly. His stats had increased quite a bit, and other than leveling up from the S-tier monster and the scum in the Dark Gathering, it was also a product of his skill. How many have I killed? The answer was presented to him in a perfect format. Tier B. Ability, you grow stronger based on the amount of human lives you take. Additional stats will be stacked based on this number. Current additional stats. Life force, 51. Mono level, 51. Combat ability, 51. I see. Ray's expression appeared a little downcast as he looked at the numbers. He wasn't particularly bothered about the number of people he had killed, as his eyes were focused on something else entirely. So this is the value of 1,000 lives? It's quite small. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. A little master and servant bonding experience never hurt anyone, so I hope you enjoyed the chapter. Chapter 367, Another Proposal from Ader. And that's where we stand now. As Ray listened to Ader's full report, he found himself blown away by all he heard. Not only was he pleasantly surprised, but he was also shocked by just how much Ader knew and how many steps he had taken on his own. I never even told him about yet he figured it out on his own. Thanks to that, he was able to preserve the dead bodies of the important players that he killed. Also Ray. Oils copy their skills later. Great job, Ader. You even went ahead and took action regarding the investigation of the vermin in the Alliance. After seeing the names on those packets of meat, Ray knew that a lot of people, if they could even be called that, would have to be purged from the Alliance. It was the best route to take. I will acquire all those names from the Royal Council's inventory and inform the Shadow Slaves to investigate and execute them. Ray smiled and nodded at Ader, pleased to have such an autonomous and intelligent person by his side. Should I have sent him to the Dark Gathering while I stayed in the capital instead? Ray smiled internally. He wondered how different things would have been if Adrian had to deal with Ader and not him. Would he have been able to locate Adrian's real body and capture him? It was all speculative anyway, so there's no need to think too deeply about their matchup. Maybe next time, then. Ray mused, and he furthered his discussion with Ader on other matters. I'm surprised he was even able to turn them all into undead. That's not a part of his skills, so. He must have shape-shifted and used the skill of the Claudius guy. Ray realized that Ader probably didn't need to preserve their corpses for him since he could just copy them directly from him. Still, it was smart for Ader to have undead that could end up being useful, one way or the other. What are your plans now, Master? Ray raised his brow as Ader asked this question. The dark undertaking is over, and in due time, the dungeon raid will be concluded as well. I was just curious about what you planned on doing after that. Ray rubbed his chin upon hearing the question. It would be a lie if he said there hadn't been any planning on his end. However, nothing was concrete enough to be considered a proper plan. I want to defeat lots of stronger enemies so I can level up more. Despite killing 1,000 humans, I barely leveled up 2 times. If this keeps up, I will probably fall off and be surpassed by the likes of Adonis. His enchanted items were giving him quite the advantage when it came to base stats, thanks to his ability to equip a lot higher than normal. But what of it? Eventually, if he wasn't careful, others would catch up to him. I see. I do not believe you need to worry about that, at least, not for the time being. There will be plenty of opportunities for you to grow stronger in the near future. Ader responded with a smile. Ray wondered if his thought process was too childish after looking at Ader's doting smile. He blushed a little in embarrassment. What did you mean by plans, then? Quickly asking to change the topic, Ray found himself rushing through the question. I was talking about what you plan on doing with this place. This United Human Alliance. What do I plan on doing? I don't understand. Do you ever consider the possibility of leading this entire nation? Perhaps. Becoming the king. Yet. I can make that happen, Master. If you rule this place, then it will be a lot easier to. What are you talking about, Ader? Me being a ruler? I'm only 16. Ray slapped his hand on his forehead as he stared at his familiar in disbelief. He couldn't believe Ader was thinking that far already. This guy is seriously giving me too much credit. I do not believe your age is an important factor, though. You have done and achieved more than what most would never dream of in their lifetime. Ader responded calmly. Sighing very loudly, he shook his head while raising one hand to show his lack of interest in the suggested position. The answer is no. I would rather be a fighter and leave all the administrative stuff to those in charge than to govern everything myself. But you can merely leave a proxy behind while you fight. Besides, do you not believe that the strongest should be the one to lead? Of what use is strength without maturity and cunning to back it up? Ray answered in swift motion. Surely, Ader would have to agree that a leader needed more than raw power to be able to properly lead a group of people. If they didn't have the skills necessary for commanding the respect, trust, and fear of those that followed them, then naught was no use. That is why you have me, master. Ader's answer caught Ray off guard. He didn't expect his familiar to be so adamant on the subject. And he had no further rebuttals to give. The answer is no. Ray maintained his ground, squeezing his fingers on the surface of his palms. There's no way I would want to be such a high-profile person. He was still struggling with balancing his dual identities, yet Ader wanted to suggest something even more draining. No way. Getting stronger comes first. If I'm strong enough, I can just influence Conrad and Vita to do whatever I want, as relics of course. He could enjoy his time with his classmates as Ray, while also building his strength and commuting the necessary evils as relics. It was straining and convoluted, but thanks to his list of skills, Ray was convinced that he could do all of it. There was no need for more. I understand, master. Then, please forget I said anything. Your idea wasn't bad, Ader. Maybe when I grow older and become a lot more responsible. Ray laughed, clearly making light of the issue. Ader shrugged and gave a slight chuckle too. Yes. Maybe. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. What do you think about the suggestion? King Ray doesn't seem that bad, does it? Haha.